MS Bruce 96 sits in the Bodleian Library at Oxford right now. Papyrus leaves worn thin, not by age, but by use. Ritual use. The manuscript measures roughly 31 centimeters in height, written in Coptic uncial script, acquired in 1773. High-resolution scans exist. The full ritual sequence they contain has never been publicly announced. What someone carried these pages through, what hands worked them soft, the record does not say. But the where does. Removed, reclassified, renamed heresy. The books of Zhu were composed in the first half of the 3rd century of the Common Era. For roughly 16 centuries, institutional Christianity ensured they stayed buried. Not lost, buried. There is a difference. Lost things disappear by accident. Buried things disappear on purpose. Here is what makes the suppression harder to dismiss. The Pistis Sophia, itself a recovered Gnostic text, cites the books of Zhu directly as authoritative scripture. That cross-reference survived, which means the early church knew exactly what it was removing. It was not ignorance. It was a decision. 1,600 years of deliberate burial. And then in 1773, James Bruce carries a codex out of Egypt. In 1892, Carl Schmidt translates it, and what surfaces is not mythology, not allegory. It is a ritual sequence, step by step, name by name, gate by gate. An operative transmission that describes precisely how to move through layers of consciousness the Church later replaced with a single, standardized prayer. In the next several minutes, you will see what the text actually instructs, what each ritual component targets, and why the Church built a replacement prayer directly over the top of it. If suppressed sacred texts and the recoverable transmissions inside them matter to you, subscribe. Every week, we surface what was removed. The first book of Zhu opens with a mapping sequence. Manuscript MS Bruce 96, Bodleian Library, Oxford. Translated by Carl Schmidt in 1892, with subsequent critical editions refining the Coptic through the 20th century. What Schmidt encountered in those opening passages was not a hymn, not a meditation, a structured, technical document. The Coptic term at the center of it is Ran Eteoab. Translators render it as holy name. That translation is accurate, but incomplete. In the operational context of the Zhu sequence, Ran Eteoab functions as something closer to a frequency key, not a title given to a divine being, a specific vibrational designation. A name whose utterance is meant to produce a precise effect at a precise threshold. The distinction matters enormously. A title honors. A frequency key unlocks. The text maps 12 of them. 12 distinct, ineffable names, each assigned to a specific archontic gate. The word archon carries its own weight here, from the Greek archon, meaning ruler or gatekeeper. In the cosmology of the Zhu text, these are not metaphors for psychological states. They are described as literal thresholds, each governed, each requiring a corresponding name to pass. Remove the wrong name, or apply it in the wrong sequence, and the gate does not open. The sequence is not interchangeable. It is locked. Here is where the document becomes difficult to explain away. Carl Schmidt was a 19th century philologist working from a single, deteriorating codex. He had no access to modern neuroscience. He had no framework for consciousness research, no language of threshold states or dissolution sequences. He had damaged papyrus and a Coptic lexicon. Yet the gate sequence he translated is internally consistent across every layer of the manuscript. 12 gates, 12 names, a fixed order of progression that does not waver, does not contradict itself, does not loop back. 1,700 years of physical degradation, and the sequence holds. Now consider what modern consciousness researchers have independently mapped. Practitioners of deep meditative states, particularly those working within traditions that document the phenomenology of inward progression, consistently report 12 discrete threshold experiences before what researchers identify as full dissolution of subject-object awareness. 12. Not 11, not 13. The same number the Zhu text assigns to its archontic gates. And the order of those thresholds, as documented in contemporary contemplative neuroscience, follows the same structural logic the Zhu sequence describes. Each stage characterized by a specific quality of dissolution, each requiring what the practitioners themselves describe as a kind of surrender or key before the next threshold opens. Dr. James Austin, whose 1998 work, Zen in the Brain, remains one of the most rigorous neuroscientific treatments of meditative phenomenology, documents progressive stages of consciousness alteration that map structurally onto exactly this kind of layered gate passage. Austin was not working from the Zhu text. He was working from clinical observation and MRI data. The convergence is not theological, it is structural. The ancients called them archontic gates. Modern researchers call them threshold states. Same phenomenon, 1,700 years apart. And the Zhu text does not simply name the gates. It provides the operative keys to move through them, in sequence, by name. What Schmidt translated in 1892 was not a relic of superstition. It was a technical manual for a process that consciousness research has since confirmed is real, measurable, and reproducible. The church that buried this text knew what it contained. What it replaced it with did not include the keys. But the text doesn't stop there. The ritual section of the second book of Zhu sits inside Bruce Codex MS Bruce 96, held at the Bodleian Library in Oxford, translated by Carl Schmidt in 1892. Schmidt spent 3 years on this text. He was not a mystic. He was a papyrologist. And what he found in this section stopped him cold. The passage describes 3 sequential baptisms, not metaphorical cleansings, not symbolic gestures performed once at a font. A procedure. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. Each with a distinct function, each building on the last. The Coptic term for the second baptism is Mao Noaween. Translators have rendered it as water of light. But pull the term apart. Mao is water, yes. Woaween is light. Not water that is blessed, not water that represents something, a medium that carries light, a vibrational substrate. The text treats it as a physical agent acting on a physical body. Here is the sequence as the manuscript records it. Fire comes first. It seals the body. The text specifies that fire binds the outer form, closes it against what Schmidt translates as archontic interference, external claims on the practitioner's consciousness. Water of light comes second. It dissolves those claims. Not symbolically. The text uses language of erasure, of removal, of a debt being cancelled. The spirit of light comes third. It opens what the manuscript calls the pleroma gate, the full realm, the complete divine field. 3 stages, each one a precondition for the next, none optional, none reorderable. No church sacrament operates this way. Baptism in every major Christian tradition is a single event. Confirmation is separate. Anointing is separate. They do not build on each other in sequence. They do not reference a gate. They do not name a destination with coordinates. This is not a confession of faith. This is a procedural document. And here is the impossible knowledge beat. Stanislav Grof, a Czech psychiatrist working at the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center between 1975 and 1988, documented what he called holotropic states, non-ordinary states of consciousness induced through controlled breathwork. His clinical records, published in his 1985 work Beyond the Brain, describe a consistent three-phase dissolution sequence that emerged across hundreds of subjects. Phase 1, a sensation of heat, of the body being sealed or bounded, often described as burning. Phase 2, a sense of flowing, of prior constraints dissolving, of something being released from the body's field. Phase 3, an opening. Subjects described it as a gate. Some use that word exactly. Groff was not working from Coptic manuscripts.
Before we continue, some of what I've learned simply never makes it onto YouTube. That's why I started the Gnostic newsletter, a free newsletter where I go deeper into esoteric Gnostic teachings, hidden wisdom, and the mysteries we don't share in these videos. And when you sign up, you'll receive a Gnostic guide to mastering reality as a welcome gift, completely free. You'll find it through the link in the description below or by scanning the QR code on your screen. I'll give you a moment to do that.
He had no access to Schmidt's 1892 translation as a clinical framework. He was mapping what the nervous system produces when pushed through a specific sequential process. The second book of Zhu mapped the same sequence, in a language that had been locked in an Oxford library for centuries, describing a procedure that predates Groff's research by at least 1,600 years. Groff called it a model of consciousness. The manuscript called it a baptism. The phenomenology, the actual reported experience, is identical. Fire seals, water dissolves, light opens. That is the order. That has always been the order. And the tradition that replaced this text with a single water rite and called it sufficient either did not understand what it was replacing or understood exactly. What comes after the gate opens is where this text becomes genuinely difficult to contain. The first book of Zhu contains something that no one in the popular record talks about. Not the invocations, not the divine names, the diagrams. Bruce Codex MS Bruce 96, translated in full by Violet McDermott in 1978 for the Nag Hammadi study series, includes cipher diagrams spanning 7 consecutive manuscript pages. Concentric rings, integer sequences arranged in specific spatial relationships, lines connecting nodes at precise angular intervals. McDermott noted their structural complexity and largely left their interpretation to future researchers. Most future researchers moved on. The text names what these diagrams represent. The Coptic term is Thesaurus Mpuawain, the treasury of light. Translators have handled this as a metaphor, a poetic name for heaven, for the divine realm, for salvation. But the manuscript does not treat it as a metaphor. It treats it as a location, a mapped destination. The diagrams are the coordinates. Thesaurus means storehouse, treasury, a place where things are held. Mpuawain means of light. Not a metaphor for abundance, a specific place where light is stored, structured, and accessed. The diagrams are not decorative. They are the map. Now, here is what those diagrams contain. The integer sequences embedded in the concentric seal structures produce specific ratios when you divide adjacent values. 3 to 2, 4 to 3, 9 to 8. These are not arbitrary numbers. They are not numerological decoration. They are the harmonic series, the precise frequency ratios that govern acoustic resonance, the ratios that determine which sound frequencies reinforce each other and which cancel, the ratios that Pythagoras recorded in the 6th century BC, 600 years before this text was composed, as the mathematical foundation of musical harmony and, by extension, of cosmic structure. Pythagoras called them the music of the spheres. He documented 3-2 as the perfect fifth, 4-3 as the perfect fourth, 9-8 as the whole tone. These ratios appear in modern acoustic physics under the same values, confirmed by frequency measurement in units of hertz. They are not cultural constructs. They are properties of vibrating systems in physical reality. The seal diagrams in the first book of Zhu encode those same ratios across 7 pages of a Coptic manuscript, a manuscript that predates the Kabbalistic tree of life schematics, the most well-known sacred geometry diagram in Western esotericism by at least 300 years. The tree of life is often treated as the origin point of this kind of structured divine mapping. It is not. The Zhu diagrams are older, they are more specific, and they carry integer values that map directly onto measurable physical phenomena. The author of this text either had access to a tradition that understood harmonic physics as a structural principle of consciousness navigation, or independently arrived at the same mathematical relationships that acoustic science would later confirm. There is no third option that makes this easier to explain. The Treasury of Light is not a poetic destination. It is a mapped location with a frequency signature, and the cipher diagrams are the tuning instructions. But here's what makes this stranger. The diagrams were not the final layer. The text places them inside a larger sequence, and that sequence has a spoken component. The invocation sequence in the second book of Zhu is the most operationally specific passage in Bruce Codex MS Bruce 96. Violet McDermott's 1978 translation, produced for Brill's Nag Hammadi Studies series, renders it with careful attention to the Coptic structure. What that structure reveals has no parallel in any surviving liturgical tradition. The key term is mouth, Coptic. It means to call, to summon, but not in the sense of petition, not in the sense of asking. The semantic field of mouth is activation. You mouth a mechanism. You mouth a name to put it into operation. The same root appears in contexts of commanding, of initiating a process, of causing something latent to become active. This is not prayer in any institutional sense. This is a technical verb. And the call it introduces is a 5-part sequence. The manuscript is explicit. Name the invisible God, not a title, the specific name held in the seal. Declare the divine spark. Assert the practitioner's own origin point as light, as a fragment of the pleroma. Cite the seal. Speak the numerical cipher that corresponds to the gate. Speak the cipher, the tonal sequence embedded in the diagram. Demand passage, not request. The Coptic verb used in the 5th step carries no supplication. It is the language of a traveler presenting credentials at a border. 5 steps, each one a precondition for the next, each one doing something the previous step cannot do alone. Now count what institutional prayer contains. A name, sometimes 2. A petition. That is the structure of every mainstream Christian prayer form, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox. Name, then ask. Steps 1 and 2, stripped of context. Steps 3, 4, and 5 are absent. Not simplified, absent. The mechanism is gone. What remains is the outer shell, the address and the request, with no operative sequence connecting them to anything. The invisible God is addressed directly 14 times in the surviving invocation text of the second book of Zhu. 14 times. 0 references to priestly mediation. 0 instructions to approach through an intermediary. 0 acknowledgement that another human being is required to make the call valid. The practitioner addresses the source, directly, using a specific sequence, carrying specific credentials. This is the impossible knowledge beat, the cognitive science of directed intention, documented in research by William Tiller at Stanford between 1997 and 2004, measuring the effect of structured intentional states on physical systems, consistently finds that intention without a structured protocol produces negligible measurable effect. Tiller's work, published in Conscious Acts of Creation in 2001, found that structured, sequential intentional protocols produced statistically significant changes in the physical targets. Unstructured petition produced none. The second book of Zhu describes a structured, sequential protocol. 16 centuries before Tiller's measurement apparatus existed, the text already knew that the sequence was the mechanism, that petition alone was not the call, that without the seal, the cipher, and the demand, you were not transmitting, you were talking to yourself. The Church did not lose this call. The evidence inside this manuscript is too precise, too structured, too operationally specific for that explanation to hold. Something this exact does not disappear through neglect. It disappears through replacement. And what replaced it was designed to be followed, not used. The text that survived tells you what was removed, and the next question is the one this manuscript refuses to leave unanswered. Ms. Bruce 96 sits in the Bodleian Library right now, cataloged, digitized, publicly accessible. The full ritual sequence survives intact across both books of Zhu, not fragmented, not reconstructed, intact. Carl Schmitt's critical edition is in print. Violet McDermott's translation is in print. You can verify both today. The mechanism was never destroyed. It was reclassified as heresy and left in plain sight. That is the part that should stop you. The call still names the invisible God directly, 14 times, in sequence, in Coptic, exactly as it was transmitted. The archive is open. The transmission is still running. Which of the 5 steps in the call stayed with you? Tell us below. This channel follows the transmission wherever it was buried. Subscribe if that matters to you.